welcome to Morgan Through a Lens. I'm Morgan, and today we're going to be talking about what to expect on an African safari and basically everything you need to know to go on an African safari. Firstly, I do not like the term African safari because here people don't really call them safaris, they call them game drives, and also Africa is a very diverse continent, and to say that all African safaris are the same is a bit of a generalization, but I do think there are things that apply to a lot of different game drives or safaris, so that's the term I'm going to be using just for ease. I'm currently at Ila Lodge, which is in Zambia on the Kafue River on the outskirts of the Kafue National Park. I've been to Ila before and I made what I think is a really cool video from it, so if you guys are interested in seeing what our safari looked like back then, I will link it in the description and in the cards. I've also done a blog post about picking out the perfect South African safari, so you guys can check that out in the description and in the cards. I will link all my blog posts and videos about safaris down below and in the cards. And just a quick disclaimer, obviously my experience from game drives and safaris comes from South Africa and Zambia. Like I said, Africa is a very diverse continent, so things can change depending on where you are, which country you're in, and even which area you're in, which national park of the country, so keep that in mind. Alright, the first thing I want to talk about is when to go. Obviously people want to know when's the best time to go to Africa on a safari. So there's basically two main seasons that you need to be concerned about when traveling for a safari, and it's dry season and rainy season. In southern Africa, dry season is the winter, so like June, July-ish, because we are in the southern hemisphere, and rainy season is mostly the summer months, so like November to February-ish. Obviously it can change a little bit. So one of the pros about going in the dry season in winter is that there are less bugs because it's cold, and there's less greenery and shrubbery because everything has died because it's winter, so you can more easily spot the animals through the dead trees. Whereas in the rainy season, the bush is so big and luscious that animals get kind of lost in the tall grass and in the trees. So this clip, for instance, was done right at the end of the dry season, and as you can see, we can only see these elephants because the trees are dead. If the trees had been alive, if this had been rainy season, we would not have seen these elephants at all. However, one of the cons of the dry season is that it's really cold in the mornings and the evenings. And the bush isn't very pretty. It's actually kind of ugly. Although I do think there's some beauty in the dead. I don't know. I like it. Can you guys hear the hippos? We're on the Kafue River, so there's hippos everywhere. Okay, the pro of going in the rainy season is that there are actually a lot of babies. A lot of animals only give birth in the rainy season, which is really cool. Also, like I said, the bush is absolutely gorgeous in the rainy season. Everything's just come alive. The birds are happier, the animals are happier, there's water everywhere. That's really cool. The con of the rainy season is obviously the rain. It rains a lot, and because of that, there are so many more bugs. Also, the rainy season coincides with summer, so it just gets kind of like miserably hot during the day if it's not raining. And then the rain brings the humidity, so yeah. Also during the rainy season, a lot of camps are simply closed just because of flooding and because the roads get super muddy that you can't even drive a car on them. Unless you fly, of course, which that's expensive. There's another time in Zambia that I want to talk about that's not really a season, but it's October, which is currently happening. It's October right now. And October is the hottest month in Zambia. It's because summer has started, but the rains haven't started. So the rains break up the heat a little bit, and October is just like miserably hot, as you can tell by my complexion. The only pro coming in October is that because everything is dead and it's the very end of the dry season and the rains haven't started, there's very little water left for the animals. So all the animals kind of converge around a few isolated watering holes, which your guides know about. So you're more likely to see animals at these like very few watering holes that are left. So what I want to talk about now is where to go. Obviously, Africa is a huge continent. You have so many different options for where you can go on safari. So how do you choose? So a lot of the places that you go also determine the cost of your safari. So if you're looking for a more budget safari, something that's not too expensive, I would definitely recommend South Africa. You can get direct flights to South Africa from a lot of different places in the world, whereas other African countries, it's really hard to get a direct flight, so that automatically makes it a bit cheaper. And South Africa is a tourist hub in general, which tends to make things cheaper. However, on the flip side, that does mean it's more crowded and more touristy. Another way to pick where you want to go is by what you want to see. So some places in Africa have certain animals that other places don't. So for instance, rhinoceroses are going extinct, so there's only a few places left in the world where you can see a bunch of rhinos. So if you want to see rhinos, definitely take that into consideration. Certain places have animals that are endemic. Certain places have animals that are endemic to that location. So for instance, Alex and I went to South Luangwa a couple months ago, which I will link that video in the description and in the cards. But there are giraffes called the Thornycroft giraffes, which are only endemic to South Luangwa, which means that's the only place in the world where you can find them. There's also places like the Ngorongoro Crater, which is really cool, and a lot of people like to go there. That's in Tanzania. If you want to be on the water, you can take that into consideration. Like for instance, here we're on the Kafue River. You can also stay on the Zambezi River and other bodies of water like Lake Tanganyika and Lake Victoria. Okay, so now let's talk about lodges. You've picked when you're going, you've picked where you're going, now you need to decide where you're staying. So again, lodges can range from pretty inexpensive to really expensive depending on what you get. A lot of places you can do camping and self-catering, which means you bring your own tent, you set it up, you bring your own food, and you cook it yourself either over the fire or in small kitchens provided to you. That is obviously the cheapest route. We did that in the lower Zambezi here in Zambia, and I think it was like $20 a night, so pretty inexpensive. However, with that option, you have to pay for your own activity. So each activity you do, going on the boat, going on a game drive, costs extra. Now the lodge we're staying at now is a mid to higher range lodge. So you pay for your night and your stay and everything is included. Your food and one activity per day. So what type of lodge you want to book at also depends on what your budget is. However, some places only have the higher scale lodges, so definitely look into what type of accommodation you want, and that also can decide where you're gonna go. Lodges are normally designed where you have the main building, which is where like the pool is, and where you eat, and where the bar is, and where the offices are, and then each room is its own separate building, like around the main part of the lodge. Lodges are also quite small. They're not like your normal hotel where you have like hundreds of guests. For instance, here, I think there's only 20 guests maximum at a time. And Alex and I stayed at a lodge in July where I think their max guest count was like 6 people. So a safari vacation at a fancy lodge is definitely smaller and more intimate. However, if you stay at lodges that offer camping and self-catering, that usually means they can host more people. Okay, so another question I get a lot is, what does your day-to-day look like when you're on an African safari? So your routine will look something like this. You'll get a wake-up call around 5:30. They'll bring hot water to your room and tea and coffee, and you slowly get ready while the sun's about to rise. Then you head over to the main lodge, eat a light breakfast, usually like cereal, yogurt, toast, more tea and coffee, of course, and then you head out on your first activity of the day, which is usually a morning game drive. Morning game drives are my favorite. It's the best time to see animals. It's when everyone's waking up, and it's when the animals are the most active. During the heat of the day in the afternoon, most animals are sleeping, so you don't really want to go out on a game drive then. So your morning game drive or morning activity usually lasts from like 6:30 till about 9:30 in the morning. Then you head back to the lodge and have brunch. After brunch, you can go back to your room, you can go in the swimming pool. You can do an activity around lunchtime in the afternoon, but honestly, it's just so hot. Most people just want to chill by the pool or take a nap in their room by the fan, because granted, you did wake up at like 5:30. Around 3:30 is when tea and coffee is served and a snack, and then 4 o'clock is when your next activity starts usually. So your next activity could be a nighttime game drive, which is very similar to the morning game drive, or it could be a sunset boat cruise, for instance. Your night activity ends around 7:30, then you come back to the main lodge, have dinner, sit by the fire, chat with the other guests, and then head to bed. It's honestly like the most relaxing vacation ever. It's so fun and I love it. Okay, so you're probably thinking, besides game drives, what are the other activities I can do while I'm on a safari? So obviously game drives are the most common and the most popular activity to do when you're on safari. That is why you're on safari, to see animals. But you can also do a sunset boat cruise, for instance, which is basically like a game drive but on the water, and you're boating around looking for animals on the shore that are coming to the river or lake to drink, and you're looking for hippos and crocodiles in the water. It's really relaxing. You usually have a drink with you and you're watching the sunset while you're boating around. It's really nice. Other activities include fishing, you can go on a canoe ride, you can go bike riding, or you can do a walking safari. Walking safaris are when you walk in the bush. You usually don't walk very far, so you don't see a ton of animals, but it's really cool because the guide will teach you how to read the bush, how to know where to look for animals, how to identify them based on their scat, which I think is just a fancy word for poop. But walking safaris are really cool. Just don't expect to see a ton of animals because you're not really going that far. Oh, another activity that you can do is spas. A lot of lodges have spas, which is really nice. So game drives are my favorite activity to do on a safari, obviously because you're on a safari and you're doing a game drive. Anyway, but game drives are great. You spend about 3, maybe 4 hours out in the bush looking for animals, driving around. Halfway through, you stop for some tea and coffee and snacks. If you haven't caught a pattern here, we love tea and coffee. You're spotting animals with your guide. It's honestly so relaxing and so fun, and I love it. What should you pack for your African safari? I think a lot of people err on the side of Bear Grylls on a deserted island, which is not necessary, but if it makes you feel cool, then go for it. I think a lot of people bring hiking shoes, which you really don't need unless you're going on a walking safari. I wore flip-flops this morning on my morning game drive because you're spending most of the time in the vehicle anyway, so you don't really need them, but do bring them if you plan on doing some walking. Bring loose, lightweight clothing that can protect you from the sun, but also protect you from getting bug bites and also keep you cool at the same time. Definitely bring a hat, bring sunscreen. Most lodges will provide bug spray. You want to bring your passport, wallet, all of that stuff. Swimsuit, most lodges have a pool, and obviously your camera, memory cards, batteries, all that stuff. You have lots to take pictures of. Also do bring a few key medicines, especially if you have allergies, bring allergy medicine. Most lodges are far away from big cities, and although the lodges are prepared for medical emergencies, you just want to make sure you have a few key things with you. So if you know you get headaches, you can bring headache medicine. If you know you get bad heartburn, you can bring heartburn medicine. Lodges do have things, but you can't be sure they're going to have exactly what you need when you need it. Okay, a few extras I want to talk about that I think people will have questions about is tipping. You definitely want to tip your safari guide. You want to tip the staff. It's very commonplace. My first game drive, I was so nervous about pointing out animals that the guide didn't see. For some reason, it just made me feel self-conscious. I don't know, maybe no one else has related to this, but don't feel nervous to point out animals the guide hasn't seen. For some reason, I thought that if I pointed out an animal that he hadn't seen, he would think that I thought he was doing a bad job. But guides are humans too. They only have two eyes. They can only look in one direction at a time, and they miss things. It has nothing to do with the quality of them as a guide. It's just people miss things. And the guides are seated much lower. They're in the front of the car, and you're raised above in the back, so you're more likely to see things anyway. And trust me, the guides do not take offense if you see an animal that they haven't spotted yet. Obviously, you want to make sure you're quiet on your game drive. You don't want to spook the animals, and it might ruin the other guests' experience. You can chat and stuff and whisper, but especially when you're around an animal and everyone's taking pictures, stay as quiet as possible. I remember my first game drive, the second I saw a lion, I was like, ah! And I didn't actually, but internally I was like, ah! And I wanted to scream, but I had to remind myself to be quiet. Make sure to bring toilet paper on your game drive. Most national parks don't have toilets. Some larger, more touristy national parks like Kruger will have toilet facilities. Do you hear these hippos? But most don't, so you either have to hold it or you have to do a bush pee. I think people, myself included, have gotten spoiled watching National Geographic and Animal Planet, where there's always a cool animal on the screen, but in a game drive that's not the case. Oftentimes you'll go long stretches without seeing a cool animal. You'll probably see a bird or an impala or something, which they are cool animals, but probably not what you went on your game drive to see. So just be prepared for that. Also, a quick note, most lodges are in national parks, or at least in the GMA, which is the game management area around national parks. So there's animals everywhere. For instance, when I was driving into Ela the other day, I was stopped on the road by two very angry elephants. I had to back up and wait 15 minutes for them to finish eating and pass along their way. Nature runs on its own clock, and I think we expect nature to conform to us, but that's just not the case. So be prepared to have lizards in your room and frogs. We had a bat in our shower one time. You might have baboons climbing over your ceiling, monkeys stealing your food. It's just common, so expect that when you're staying at a lodge. To that note, it can be kind of dangerous when you're walking around the lodge at night, so most lodges will actually escort you from the main building where your dinner is to your room every night. Honestly, just for your own protection. And every room comes with a bullhorn. Yeah, a bullhorn. Most lodges put a bullhorn in your room because you're pretty far spread out from other guests and from the main lodge, so if there's an emergency, there's really no way for people to hear you, so you have to blow your You have to blow... Oh my god, I can't say it. You have to blow your bullhorn. That's such a weird word. The last little note I have is that you're on safari, you're not going to have good cell service, so just accept that. A lot of lodges have Wi-Fi, but sometimes only in the main building and not in your room, so... I don't know what animal that was. Be prepared to be off the grid. I honestly think that's half the fun of going on these types of trips, but don't expect to be tuned into your life back home. Okay, so the last thing I think people are going to ask is, what are the costs? So like I said, you can do a safari for quite cheap, going up to extremely expensive. So if you do camping with self-catering, it can cost $20 a night plus an activity, which each activity, depending on what country you're in, could be anything from like $20 to $50. And then the highest end lodges are like thousands of dollars a night, but include all your activities, your food, and stuff like that. Obviously, most trips don't cover flights, so if you want to fly somewhere relatively inexpensive, I recommend South Africa. Alright guys, I just gave you so much information and I'm sure I missed things, so if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below and I'll do my best to answer them. I will also link all my blog posts, videos, and resources in the description. If you guys want to see more videos about travel, expat life, Zambia, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, at Morgan Through a Lens, and I'll see you next week. Bye. Whoa, oh, 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 oh. Whoa, oh, oh.